Hello and welcome to Sustainable Leadership Live. I'm Lisa Danforth, your host, and today I have the lovely Lisa Rees. Lisa, thank you for joining today. I am so excited to just learn from you and hear all that you have to share.
Thanks for asking me. I'm really excited to be here, Lisa. Thanks.
You are welcome. Before we jump in, I want to share a little bit about Lisa, why she's here, and all the amazing things that she's been up to over the years. So Lisa is an author. She's an emotional intelligence consultant, and she's a certified leadership and development coach. And previously, she worked for the federal government for over 3 decades as a manager and a leadership coach. Lisa is the co-author of 3 books: A Leader's Guide to Solving Challenges with Emotional Intelligence, Developing Your Emotional Intelligence Skills, and the Educator's Practical Guide to Emotional Intelligence. And today we are talking about how to leverage emotions to achieve success, something that I think that we can all develop and lean into more by all means. So Lisa, welcome, welcome, welcome. And I say, let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Okay. Now, we were talking in the green room. I think the best place to start really is, what is the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional quotient? Let's just sort of put that one out there.
Let's do that, because that's the biggest question that we hear all the time. There's a lot of information out there. You mentioned that you were Googling it, and it had these conflicting things. What is it? So just to set the record straight, emotional intelligence was first spoken about in a paper that was done by 2 doctoral students at Yale, Peter Salovey and John Mayer. He goes by Jack, and in 1995. Or 1990. And that was the first opportunity for people to be introduced to this ability approach of emotional intelligence. So over these years, it has evolved, and it kind of morphed into EQ, emotional quotient. And so a lot of people, when I say that I do emotional intelligence, they say, well, I've already done that. I totally understand what it is. But when they realize that the emotional intelligence can be measured, and that it's a performance ability, like it's a skill, it's a hard skill, it's not a soft skill, and it can be measured by something called the mesquite, the Mayer Salovey Caruso emotional intelligence test. So David Caruso and Jack and Peter joined together to form this tool. And what's really different about it is that all the other EQ tests are their self-report, meaning that I complete it and I say, oh yes, in this situation, I would do that. For sure I would. I would act emotionally intelligent. And so you yeah, and you maybe, put what you hope that you do. But what the mesquite does is it looks at 4 distinct abilities, and it compares your answers to what 21 emotion researchers throughout the world have decided what is the right answer. So oftentimes people will overestimate their emotional intelligence. They'll be surprised when they get their results. And so when I give people their mesquite feedback and their report, they sometimes don't believe it, or they are, I call it either affirming or awakening. It affirms what they know, and it could awaken something like, I did not realize that. So the psychometrics around it, a lot of times when we're coaching and consulting, do we really look at the psychometrics of a tool to make sure it's the best tool we're using? So the psychometrics for the mesquite is the highest. And so that when you get your results, again, we don't say it's right, like you must be emotionally intelligent or you're not. We say the report suggests, or we make hypotheses about the results, and we say, does this apply to your real life? Can you see it showing up for you? So it does require a lot of skill to be able to give people feedback and to share these results, because it's a lot different than your typical EQ. So that's why I try to take some time to explain that EQ, while there are similarities to emotional intelligence, it's measured differently. It's based mostly on trait-based personality, social behaviors, where EI is based on the 4 abilities that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I so appreciate you talking about that, because before we jumped on, I thought I'm just going to Google it and see, right? Emotional intelligence is not the same as, it popped up and explained that it was exactly the same. So I think it's wonderful that you're able to describe the difference and sort of show the difference. But let's jump in and talk about the 4 abilities. I love all of these, and definitely go and get Lisa's book, Lisa and David's book as well,
David,
because
yes.
there's so much in this little book for information and examples and questions. So let's
Yeah.
talk about those 4 abilities.
Yeah, so just to give people, like why did we do this book? So David Caruso, who's one of the co-creators of the Mesquite, I took his certification class back in 2011 at Yale. He's on the Yale faculty, and he's also part of the Emotional Intelligence Center there. And I was doing my master's in public administration, and I stumbled across this term emotional intelligence. It was the first time I had heard of it. And when I realized how awesome it was and what it could do for leaders, I'm being a leader in government. I said, I need to take this course. So when he and I got together, I was like, David, this is important. We need to do a book. We need to get the word out here. So we developed this really quick read with something we call the emotional blueprint. So you mentioned these 4 abilities, and it's based on, again, the ability performance based model that Jack and Peter created. So we used the alliterative process of to make it memorable that in emotions you can map, match the meaning of emotion and moving your emotion. So when you use those 4 abilities together, you form the emotional intelligence blueprint, which in our book, we show you how to use that to solve your challenges. And we give scenarios like 25 blueprints of the typical stuff in the office. And honestly, I used a lot of it from my own history. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, but we said we need to get this out there and start to really educate people that you can do this in real time and you can integrate it into your day-to-day work and personal lives.
So taking people through all 4 of those abilities. Can you share an example? Because that was one of the things that the biggest takeaway, this book has examples of the 4 abilities for working with teams and individuals, is it? And leading up and across.
Yes.
Perfect examples. So if you're struggling with how to implement this, definitely get the book, read all of the blueprint examples. So would you be
Mhm.
willing to share an example so that people can see how they can implement this work?
Abs- Absolutely. Because a lot of times what happens is that we're so excited about the content, right? We got to get people to understand what this is, that we forget that if we don't allow people to apply it back to their lives and to see how it actually works together, then you're missing the whole point. So, what David and I do is we always start with what is the outcome, the ideal outcome that you want from this interaction. So as you mentioned in the book, it's how do you lead up, across, and also down, because
Mhm.
that's how we operate. And so we always say to people, always begin with your outcome in mind.
Mhm.
So why do we do that? Why would we care? Because if you keep your eye on the ball and your eye on the goal, then you know that some of your behaviors or some of your actions aren't working towards that goal. So, if we were to do an example, like I was thinking about us today,
Mhm.
you know, what is your outcome that you would like from this half hour together? What is your ideal outcome, Lisa?
There's so many. There's so many. To learn from you, because I love the book and to be able to engage, but to also share it with the audience so they can see that it is not so hard, right? When you have a framework to work from, it's amazing how it can impact how we're showing up, our relationships, and our success, just really leveraging those emotions.
Exactly. So we both have this goal that we want to work toward together to have a really productive, interesting, and share with the audience
Mhm.
this great tool. So that's a great objective. But now we get into the emotional intelligence blueprint. And
Uh-oh.
the first part of it is the mapping,
Mhm.
which is actually perceiving emotion in ourselves and other people around us. So if I were to ask you, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about this time together? And you had mentioned a few emotions before we even started. But how do you feel when you're about to do this dialogue?
I get really excited to bring someone to the audience to have the discussion, but I also feel nervous. I've been doing this for over 2.5 years, but I still get these nerves when I'm about to hit go live. I know we were
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. So you have these two emotions, and sometimes people think emotions are good or bad,
Mhm,
but they're not. They're all really helpful. They can be helpful.
mhm.
The key is to knowing which ones are the most helpful. So we're going to get to that in a moment, but it's great that you were able to say, "Hey, Lisa, I'm feeling really excited," which I could tell in the way you were talking, but also that you're really honest with me. Like, I'm also a little nervous here. And we're going to talk about that, which is a good thing.
Okay.
So then it's not only about you, Lisa, it's about me too, because
Wait a
I'm in
minute.
this with you. So, how do you know how I'm feeling? What would you do with a guest? How do you know how I'm feeling?
Oh, that is so good. Body language, tempo, are they engaged? Sort of eye contact, even though it's Zoom, you can tell that they're looking at the picture, if not the camera, right? So just
Yeah,
sort of reading their energy for me, and especially if I've spoken with them before, you know, has the tempo changed? Are they
yeah,
tentative? Yeah. And
exactly.
asking questions.
Right. And so, like, you met with me prior to this. So that got me more comfortable. I now have a relationship with you. It feels more natural. But I also feel excited and nervous as well. So now we both know how. So we just mapped the emotion.
Mhm.
So now we move on to the second, which is matching our emotion to the task or our goal, which is to have a successful event at hand. So is excitement helpful to our conversation? Would you say it's helpful?
I think it's incredibly helpful. I think it can also work in the opposite direction too, if we get too far out
Hmm.
there.
You're exactly right. Because there are times when you need to be more lower energy, lower pleasantness. And so when you said you're feeling a little anxious, that's actually the opposite emotion on the scale. So actually that's really good. Why is being anxious helpful?
To me, it means that it's what I'm about to do is important, right? So whether it is important to me, important to others, important to getting the message out there, I think it also is helping me anchor in what's going on for me,
Mhm.
feeling the emotion, and then therefore what do I need to ground myself.
Ooh, you're really getting this. This is very good. You're right on track. So you're right. It is about, bringing your A game. When you're feeling a little anxious and nervous, don't we prepare more? Don't we? Aren't we on a little on edge and a little guarded, like what could happen here? And so having anxiety, and David and I have done hundreds and hundreds of webinars and presentations, and honestly, every time we feel a little nervous, which is good. So we need to know that our emotions are actually contagious. There's something called
Mhm.
emotional contagion. So what happens is your excitement will get me excited. Your anxiety, honestly, will get me anxious, most likely. And now, if you think of that in the broader sense, if we were both on edge right now, I bet our audience would
Hard.
be really on edge, right? So we need to say, what are we going to bring out? What emotions?
Mhm.
Well, let's bring out the happiness, the excitement, the contentment. We're really happy to be together. So again, the emotional piece of it, the matching emotion is about what are the most helpful emotions and then making sure that we establish emotional connection to
Mhm.
others through something we call emotional empathy. Because emotional empathy is when you feel what other people feel, which is different than cognitive empathy, which we'll talk about. Cognitive empathy is it's here. I know what to say. I know what to do. And it still works, but it just feels differently.
Mhm.
Because if I say, how does sadness feel for you? How does anger feel for you? Where does happiness show up for you?
Mm.
It's very different physiologically, right?
Mhm.
The feeling when
Absolutely.
you're angry or when you're happy, such a difference.
Mhm.
So that's the matching emotion to the task at hand. So I think you get an A plus for matching your emotion to
Yay!
the task at hand. Yes. So now we're going to move on. So what we just did was the actual experiential part of
Mhm,
EI, which is experiencing emotion. Now we're going to switch into cognitive emotional intelligence, which is the strategic part.
mhm.
So it's understanding, why do we feel the way we do? So if I were to ask you, well, Lisa, why do you feel nervous? Why do you feel excited? You would have a reason, correct?
Correct.
And so would I. It's great to have an opportunity to talk about something I love. You have been doing these podcasts for a long time and you're excited about them. And so it makes sense why you would feel that way. And you always do a nice job. So obviously, your anxiety and worry is a good thing. So we understand, because what we say is that emotions happen for a reason.
They
There's
do.
an underlying cause of emotion. And so if we really think about it, that emotions actually progress from mild to intense. So your anxiety, so let's say you're mildly worried. If you don't do anything about it, it could grow into fear. And if
Spiral.
you don't do anything about that, it could grow into terror.
Mhm.
So we know, like just like anger, frustration can lead to anger, can lead to rage. So if we get smart about it, we can do something called emotional affective forecasting, which is actually predicting what could happen. So when we're about to go into a meeting, what are some things that could happen and that could cause our emotion to change? So
Mm.
I'm just curious, Lisa, like, what do you think during our conversation could happen that could change or alter how we're feeling?
Oh, I think
Just
it could go
curious.
in so many different directions, right? I mean, this is a topic that I have heard of, I don't know a lot about. So it could be like, oh my gosh, I'm fumbling. And that's always hard being live and fumbling. That I could get too exuberant about what's going on and share too
Mm,
much. I think there's just
mm,
so many different arenas that we could go in. But
mm.
again, for me, it's like it's the anchoring. I can recognize by the tempo of my voice when I need to anchor and when I can sort of continue.
Right. So what you're doing is you're practicing real-time emotional intelligence. You really are. You're in the moment, but you're seeing what's happening.
Mhm.
And what I see a lot is that people don't prepare for really important meetings,
Yeah.
meaning that if everybody's going to be happy, like you got promoted or you hit your sales goals, everybody's excited, right? You don't have to prepare for that meeting. But if you're about to say there's layoffs at your company, or you didn't
Mhm.
get the job, or we're relocating or something, those are some really hard conversations to have. And what happens is people walk into a meeting and they just think, well, I can just think on my feet and I can just answer on my feet. Well, you see what happens. And we
Yeah.
say the wrong things, we do the wrong things. So what I say to people is one of the strategies we're going to talk about is preparing. So if we understand what might happen and we can do emotional affective forecasting, we can be better prepared. So my worry, of course, is technology, because I've been having these weird internet outages. So my terror is like, what if my internet goes out? What do we do? Or like you said, what if I say the wrong thing?
Mhm.
What if I stumble, etc.? So it's all good to understand what could happen and prepare for it. So that's the meaning of emotion. Why do we feel the way we do? But then we move to the final piece of the blueprint,
Mhm.
which is moving our emotion, or some people say manage. Now, a lot of times people think that you must control emotion, that you shouldn't show emotion. And what happens is that when you suppress emotion, what do you think happens, Lisa, when you suppress unpleasant emotion?
For me, it just gets bigger, right? It's when I'm suppressing it, it can consume me. But when I release it or talk about it, it sort of brings it to light and lessens the power it has over me.
Right, right. So it's just really important for us to realize that we get judged on how we act, what we say, and our
Mhm.
behaviors. And it's harsh, isn't it? Because sometimes you have a bad day. Sometimes you do. We all make mistakes. And that's why I say that the biggest move strategy we can use is to say, I'm sorry, is to
Mm,
actually apologize. Because if we truly screwed up and did something that offended somebody or whatever, it's just to own it.
right.
But also, there are other things that we need to do. So, what we do when we talk about moving our emotion, it's what emotions are most helpful, right? We talked about that. And then, how do you continue those emotions? What will you do? And sometimes we have to realize that we all have triggers. And so, do you know your triggers pretty much, like people or circumstances? I'm not going to ask you, but I'm just curious.
I've got a pretty good grasp, and I've done a lot of work, so I can actually feel it within my body. So that's so helpful. Took a long time to
It's
get there.
right. And that I work a lot with people and say it's really important that you know your triggers and that when you feel it, because you feel it first, remember, we feel it
Mhm.
first. The brain doesn't catch up till later. And that's when you do the damage. So if you're able to say, I'm really stressed right now. Like if you were to get frustrated right now, or even not at me, of course, but even angry, like where would you feel it in your body? Like how does it show up physiologically, or where does it show up?
Usually the back of my head and my shoulders, right? So it's this.
Oh, okay. So really tight.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so that's what I say is, are you checking in with yourself? Like what's going on and catching yourself at that moment that you're about to do that. And then there are strategies. So we have compensatory strategies, preventative strategies. I mean, there are times when sometimes, the physiological, like what do you do to calm yourself down? I'm just curious. What are some of your techniques?
Breathing, dancing, getting
Nice.
out for a walk, or,
Hmm.
texting a friend, "Hey, I'm feeling this." Just actually stating it for
Yeah.
me helps an amazing amount. So it's not just growing on the inside.
Right. And those are all wonderful strategies that have worked for you, right? This has worked for you. And that's what you need to do when you're in those situations is like, what do I need to do? Do I need to phone a friend? Do I need to go take a walk? Do I need to like write the email, but in Word so I don't send it by accident and just get it all out?
Big tip.
Because I actually did that this morning. I had something on my mind and I just wrote it in Word because I was like, so that's a
Mhm.
strategy I used. But we know that these emotions are so powerful. There's the amygdala, which is in the back of your brain, that we hear the fight, flight, freeze that happens when we're triggered, when we have emotional overload. And what the blueprint allows us to do is when you walk through it, you can actually say, all right, what am I going to do now to manage not only my own emotion,
Mhm.
but also those of others? And a lot of times people think, well, I can't manage other people's emotions. That's on them. But do you think we can help and manage other people's emotions? Like, have you ever had to do that for others?
I'm a parent, so yes, right? That mirroring, just bringing the energy down or staying calm, or I think we can influence. We do not have control over, but we have the ability to influence.
Right. And so that's important. And also like showing people empathy, just
Mhm.
listening. You said like you have friends that listen to you. That's so important because the long-term strategies, the ones that really work are you getting enough rest, sleep? Are you eating healthy? This goes to what you do, well-being, right? Are you getting enough rest? Are you exercising? Are you doing some kind of relaxation, meditation, spirituality practice? Do you have a strong social network?
Mm.
And, the pandemic has been really hard on people because it's hard over Zoom or when you're isolated to have that relationship. So empathy
Right.
goes a long way getting to know because people who are high in emotional intelligence tend to be more relational rather than transactional.
Mhm.
So you
Makes
show a
sense.
lot. Yeah. And so there's a lot that we can do to build those relationships. And that's why emotionally intelligent people build trust. So we have a lot of different options. And in the book and in the workbook, there's so many different strategies and pick the ones that work the best for you.
And implement them, definitely. I
Yeah.
love one of the things I read in the book was it's not all about being positive and relaxed all of the time, right? I think that's
Yeah.
where we can get tripped up is
Yeah.
acknowledging and feeling all of the emotions. And we don't always have to be that positive. So
Yeah.
lean into it for those who might be like, I can't be positive all the time. No, I don't think any of us can be.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point because a lot of times in corporations, organizations, we have something we call display roles. It's how you're supposed to act at work. I worked in the federal government. I was considered, people would say, "You're not emotionally intelligent, Lisa." And I'm like, wow, okay. Why? Because I was passionate. I showed my
Mm,
enthusiasm and my energy. And, that was not accepted. My boss was like, "There's no crying here. There's no emotion here." He didn't want to see it. And so what I had to do was suppress, which causes me to not trust, not to have a relationship. So it's really important that we recognize that emotions are really important. And that's why I say, like, leverage them.
mhm,
There are times when your team needs to move out. As a leader, I was a manager of 42 people and across the country. And at times I would be like, guys, we have a deadline. Let's go. Like I was matching my emotion to the
mhm.
task at hand. And I also had enough in the relationship bank, meaning that I had established positive goodwill with my staff, that they realized when I came down and was serious, they knew to move out.
Right.
So that's what you do is that you leverage your emotions. And, obviously, having people who are anxious and angry and frustrated, you don't want to keep them there very long. It's the hardest area to manage yourself and others. And so I say use it carefully, and really take care of each other to make sure that everybody's okay. Because when people are stressed, they're not communicating properly, they're not getting the work done efficiently or the best way. So use it sparingly.
Yeah. I know we're actually a little bit over time, but I would love for you to address one piece, and it's on
Yeah.
that move piece, which is it's what people can grasp more easily, but it also is a little bit harder to execute and to implement. So if you could just share a little bit, I know you touched on it before, but just because
Yeah.
we can grasp, we need to move out, but to really be able
Right.
to execute it efficiently and effectively in the
Right.
moment.
Yeah. So the biggest thing really is the first part of emotional intelligence. How are we feeling?
Mhm.
Because how we feel impacts what we think about and our behaviors. It
Perfect.
does. And
Mhm.
so we need to make sure that I know, am I infecting people in a good way? Is this the right emotion? And, if I'm feeling anger, why? And if I can understand, see, a lot of people don't like to go deep in understanding why they feel the way they do. And if
Just
you
keep busy. Just keep busy.
exactly ignore it, ignore
Right.
it, ignore it. So, there's a difference between a mood and an emotion. A mood is something that you can't really figure out. Like I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I don't know. I'm kind of cranky. An emotion has an underlying cause.
Mm,
When we go deeper within ourselves, it's really important to say, okay, I'm feeling this. Why? And then the managed piece is slow it down if we can. What do I need right now? Who do I need it to? What do I need to do? And remember, Lisa, what is our goal?
mhm.
What is our goal? Our goal today was to have a really great dialogue. So if we can keep our eye, because meetings that go off the rails, right? Emotion happens, it's derailed, and all of a sudden, what you came to achieve is gone.
Right.
Or you have to do it in 10 times more time and less efficient if you all were focusing. And that's a strategy to say, time out, let's go back to our goal. And all of a sudden, everybody shifts into the positive
Mhm.
and says, oh, yeah, we're here to have a great time and to teach and to learn and to blah, blah, blah. So that's really where the money is.
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. I so appreciate you sharing your brilliance. Would love to ask you, what's one thing, if someone took away only one thing from our conversation today, what would you like them to really be able to take
Yeah.
away and implement?
Yeah. Emotional intelligence, practicing it every day, real time, is really difficult. It's challenging. And so it's practice it and use it in everything you do.
Mhm.
And think about it in everything you do, especially the stuff that matters to you. If you can remember the blueprint, if you can remember how you show up and that it really does have an impact on others, you're probably going to have better conversations and be a better leader.
100%. It's something you can really implement in a moment, not in months. So Lisa, thank you so much. Where can people reach out to you, find you? Is there a
Yeah.
preferred social platform or your website?
Yeah, well, I love to link in with people, so definitely catch me there. I also have a website, ltrleadership.com, and it's how you can reach out to me anytime. So, and I'm always available to talk about it, share about the actual mesquite and all the other things that I can help. I'm always willing to listen and to help out in any way I can.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely reach out to Lisa. And what is your LinkedIn handle, by the way? Sometimes they're a little funky.
You know what? That's a good point. Isn't that awful? There's a link on my website.
There we go.
And I go by Tremblay, so Lisa Tremblay Rees. So you have my maiden name right in there. So that
Perfect.
might be an easy way to find me
All right.
on LinkedIn.
Lisa,
Yeah,
thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
you're so
Next
welcome.
week, May 10th. I can't believe we're there already. I have Cheryl Plouffe coming and talking about the power of podcasting in your business. It's going to be amazing. She is incredibly talented, incredibly knowledgeable. So if you're interested in utilizing podcasting for your business, definitely show up 11 a.m. East Coast, 8 a.m. on the Pacific. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.